Now, the VIX was predicting an update for the S&P 500. We got it. There was an 85% chance of an update today based on the VIX historical data, and it was correct again. So more about that in a moment. The Dow was down 99 points, down 0.22%. The S&P was up 0.82%, up 49 points. Moving back towards the highs here. Closing at 6,084. The NASDAQ making new highs. NASDAQ was up 1.77%. NASDAQ 100 making new highs. I'll show you in a moment. The Russell was up. The Russell was up almost 0.5%, up just over 11 points. The VIX was down 4.23%. Being back down below 14 at just above 3.5%. Again, it was the VIX that predicted that we would have an update today, and it was correct. Got the CPI inflation data, and it is ticking higher, but it did come in line with expectations. The market rallied with that. So again, we're going to get a cut out of the Fed on at the December meeting next week. We got the CPI before the market opened. The month-over-month came right in line with expectations. It's not listed here, but it did. And the month-over-month, the core CPI did as well. Every year also came in line with expectations with the headline number. 2.7% came in at that same level, but that was higher than the 2.6. But again, the market was expecting 2.7. So again, we got the rally. Get any surprises where it came in really, really hot, but came in line with expectations, even though it's ticking higher. We did see the core come in line with expectations as well. The core year over year was 3.3, as expected to be 3.3, and that is the same as it was previously. I do expect that the inflation data is going to continue to rise. We're seeing it already with the headline number there. I think you're going to see this start to significantly rise, ticking back up, and the expectation at some point will be, that will make it to where the Fed can't continue to cut. And again, we know recession is about to start. We'll likely see that in the first quarter, possibly by April. Be 9 months from the Somme rule being triggered. 6 months would be January. So I think we're going to see it in the first quarter. Again, recession is coming. The Fed is still going to cut rates, even if inflation ticks back higher, which is what happened in 2007. And inflation back then was much higher than it is right now, based on the numbers that have been reported. Tomorrow we'll get the producer price index, which is wholesale inflation. We'll be watching. Again, I told you I continue to believe he is likely going towards the high 6,100 area, possibly to the 6,200 area if we take our time reaching the trend line. The trend line is the target. It rises as time goes on. We have not reached it yet. The chart in just a moment. Momentum could not turn bearish for the NASDAQ. And again, we couldn't get a red bar on the oscillator. We did on the S&P. Again, rally on the NASDAQ, moving to new highs, bouncing off the 10-period moving average. Signals remain bullish. Momentum couldn't flip here with the cloud. Now, we did see the red bars on the oscillator, but I told you again, a divergence could be developing in the more recent price action here. Again, I still believe we're going to new all-time highs. I think we're going to move to that high 6,100 area. I think we're about to make new highs. Get the PPI inflation data tomorrow. We'll be watching that. But I think, again, going into the Fed meeting or just after here in December, I think we're going to see that trend line likely reached in the daily and in the weekly time frame, those trend lines. If some green bars start showing up here, again, could be that we're correcting sideways with that red awesome oscillator bar and the MACD rolling over. Momentum here still remains bullish on the S&P daily chart. Today, momentum flipping back to bullish for the S&P 500. Here as well, again, likely going to form multiple point divergences, much like what we had at these other peaks. But there's a great length in detail yesterday. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you could take a moment to do that, I would really appreciate it. If you follow the link below to take you to a secured site, you can donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. If you do that, I thank you. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, let me know that by supporting the channel today. If you could partner with me in doing that, I would really, really appreciate it. I don't have any sponsors, just a direct relationship with you. The S&P momentum line continues to be bullish. Here on the S&P daily, it's that way for NASDAQ, and Signals remain bullish. My signals remain bullish in the daily and the weekly time frame. I think that will soon end, but I do think we will move to new all-time highs on the S&P. I think we'll join the NASDAQ. Again, momentum remains bullish. Momentum line here. Trend signals remain bullish here for the NASDAQ daily chart. Again, got that T yesterday. I told you it could just be short-term. Looking at short-term momentum, it could evolve into something bigger, and then we could still go higher. It could also be warning, hey, to be watching for something to happen in the very near future. So just paying attention to this stuff here. My signals remain bullish. Now, again, the VIX predicted this rally. I told you on the intraday charts we could see a larger divergence develop. We're seeing that with NASDAQ already moving to new highs, but we could still see it with the S&P 500 as well. VIX, 3 sessions ago, was up by more than 10%, predicting a rally for the S&P, a bounce for a bottom, short-term bottom, or a bounce within 2 sessions. We got it today, and the VIX dropped back down, and the S&P rallied up. The VIX correct again. Again, the VIX, as I told you back over here, I told you it was going to drop back down. Expecting a rally ahead of the presidential election off of the 50-period moving average and horizontal support. That happened. I told you, again, we're likely going to consolidate down here and get a bottom as we move towards the trend lines on the monthly and the weekly chart. We hit the target level on the weekly, but I told you we were going to overthrow it and go to that 6,100 level. And if we take our time reaching it, if it drags out to the end of December or on into January, then it can go up to 6,200. The further right you go to the trend line, on the chart, the trend line rises. The trend line's a target, not a number. The trend line is the target. Now here's what happened today. We gapped higher, got back above the 200 in the 5-minute time frame. The 50 followed, got back above the 200. So this is positive stuff. It will likely, again, take us towards our target level above 6,100, above the previous peak. And again, likely to form a multiple divergence on the 60-minute chart. The S&P 500 came back and filled the gap over here at the 60-50 area. NASDAQ bounced off gap support. So NASDAQ's making new highs, S&P is just below that level. I talked about this divergence giving us this pullback here to fill this gap. I talked about that we could either get a bigger pullback and still go to the new high because, again, I continue to believe we're going to go to new all-time highs. I remain bullish. Yes, I believe a top is about to happen, but again, just hit my target level the previous Friday on Black Friday, and I told you we were going to overthrow that target level and go to the 6,100 level. And if we take our time reaching the trend lines I've been talking about, we might even go a little bit higher into the 6,200 range. The trend line's a target, not a number. Line in the monthly, the trend line in the weekly. We hit the monthly, now we got to hit the weekly, and then that will likely produce a reversal. Be watching to see, did we get a brand new fresh divergence right here in this move higher, or did we build upon this one over here and end up setting up a lower high with multiple points of divergence? And we saw the stochastic reach extremes. It turned back up, and now it's starting to roll over here, so we'll see what happens. But again, MACD has firmed up, moved back into positive territory. So again, I continue to believe we're moving towards that trend line in the weekly time frame. Zooming out, you can see the bigger picture here. Again, probably a larger divergence here, maybe a fresh one, but possibly a larger one here, going up and reaching this level here. And again, if we get a larger divergence, we might get one in the more recent price action here as we move towards 70 again. Probably the same situation here, a similar situation could happen on the MACD. We'll see how it unfolds. But again, I believe we're headed towards this upper trend line. Currently, we've turned off this one from the July peak, as I've talked about. Warned you about that when we hit it. We can get a reaction off of it. Reversal if I'm wrong about going up and hitting this level, but I told you that's what I think is going to happen. I continue to predict new all-time highs. Looking at this trend line, I'm looking at the trend line in the weekly time frame. Again, we're turning off the red trend line right here. Remember, we had these previous trend lines. There was no confirmation of follow through. We bounced out that 50 period ahead of the election. That's why I told you we were going to bounce ahead of the election, just like I told you here at the 20 period. Again, gap support. Again, I told you I thought we were going to bounce, go back, fill this gap, and go up towards this trend line. Well, here we are. We're up towards this trend line. We stalled up this one here from July on the red trend line. I think we're going to clear it and go to this other trend line here. Could be surrounding the Fed. My guess is you're going to see it in December happen and the start of a reversal. I've told you over and over again, The trend lines are the target here in the daily and in the weekly, and this could drag out into January. It did in 2022. It dragged out to that first week in January. I say that because of the taxes. A lot of people will wait until the new year to sell, so we'll be watching. You very well could get a December top. In 2018, we had a December top. Saw an immediate drop of 20%, so pull that out. Trend line is a target here. I do these other trend lines on this chart because, again, this trend line, we can easily move above it. We got back above the 10-period moving average, and I told you, look at this horizontal support that I've marked here. We came down, we filled the gap, and we hit this horizontal support, this previous peak over here, and we bounced. And I still remain bullish. I still think we're going higher. Still think we're going to see a new all-time high on the S&P. We did on the NASDAQ. Then, yes, I do believe we're going to top. Again, because I think we're going to top, some people ignore the part about that we're going to move to new all-time highs, that we're still going to continue to go higher, and people cherry pick and so, cherry pick what they want to hear. Don't be one of those people. I'm still bullish. I still believe we're going higher, but I think that the time is short. If you didn't watch yesterday's video, go watch it. I went through a lot of different data that shows the market is at extremes. We're about to move into recession. I try to show you a lot of things that I normally don't have the time to show you. I try to show you different things. Some data that I haven't shown you recently, and so I wanted to show that. Again, I think that we could see this divergence develop on the RSI here in the coming days ahead. This may happen surrounding the Fed meeting next week, which is 1 week from now. So again, we could very well see again this come to a conclusion. The Fed meetings tend to mark tops, bottoms, and continuations of the trend. If we look at momentum, momentum's rolled over. Well, momentum still rolled over here. And that didn't stop. We kind of went in the sideways move, and then we still continued higher, and we still ended up forming a divergence. We could see something like that and still reach this upper boundary, which I've been talking about here for a very, very long time. Continue to say, even when I predicted the July peak there on the 16th, told you we were going to sell off. Signals began a reversal off of those lows, a little bit higher, and then here at marking the bottom. And I told you over and over, and then here at the 50 period, and then here at the 20 period, even right here in the back test of the breakout, telling you over and over again, we're going to make new all-time highs. We're going to make new all-time highs. About the target on the monthly chart. Talking about the weekly target levels. Channel in the weekly time frame. So again, still think we go higher. I think we're going to push above the upper Bollinger Band. I think we're going to come up here, and I think we're going to see a peak, and that's going to be the same area where we reach the upper channel line in the weekly time frame. Now again, a number is not the target. Okay, I'm looking at numbers with this trend line and trying to tell you where they are. The trend lines are the target in the daily time frame, in the weekly time frame, and we've already hit the one in the monthly time frame, right on the nose. That 6,040 to 50 area I've talked so much about, we hit it right on the nose on Black Friday. This trend line, if we hit it again, it could take us into that high 6,100 area. If we take our time hitting it, well, guess what? The longer you take to hit it, the further right you go to the chart, the higher the trend line goes. It could push up into 6,200. We're going to hit this surrounding the Fed in all likely, or shortly thereafter, maybe before, but I think we're, again, likely on our way to do that. And I think we're likely going to see a top surrounding these levels. Again, I've been expecting this rally. Here at the 20 period, I drew this arrow up to this trend line. I still think that's the path that of where we're going. I think we'll move above the trend line from the July peak. We'll see some closes above the upper Bollinger Band in all likelihood, and then I think we'll again turn. But we could see a big rally followed by a major reversal. And just some things I'm watching. I'm watching this trend line along with the trend line that I just showed you in the daily time frame. The upper boundary, the rising wedge, could take us again closer to this trend line. They're very, very close. Again, this trend line acted as support. Now it's acting as a resistance from the 2023 low. And so again, we're watching this trend line as well. Just different trend lines I'm looking at. And again, multiple point divergence, much like what we had over here before we had a pullback. This will likely lead to a reversal based on the divergences in the weekly and the monthly time frame that are now present. It's true on the MACD. It's rolling over, but again, still may buy some time. I think we're going to reach my objective target. Again, the weekly chart. You got this trend line. If I exclude the shadow directly overhead, they intersect. If I take it out a little bit further there, the upper boundary here in blue of the channel, again, parallel boundary. So I think we're going to reach the high 61 area. Again, number is not the target. The trend line is the target. Monthly chart reached the target. I told you I thought it would overthrow it to reach this trend line right here. The longer we take to reach it, we've had a 3-week winning streak. I told you 4 weeks ago, over now 4.5 weeks ago, I told you with this red bar, going to get a rally. And I told you even before that, back over here, the election when we were bouncing off the 50 period, we hit the 50 period and horizontal support. We're going to get a rally up to this trend line. But I told you 4.5 weeks ago with the red bar that, again, I expected a bigger rally based on the volatility that I talked about over the weekend, for S&P to turn up and for it to turn down, volatility to drop. And we're even seeing that with the VIX. If we take our sweet time in reaching this trend line, and it drags out into January, the trend line is going to rise, and it's going to go up into the 6,200 area somewhere. I think we could reach it here this December, and maybe that's surrounding the Fed. We'll see what happens. But this is where I think we're going, okay? And I think that this divergence is going to produce a major reversal to complete a top. I've been talking about all-time highs. You hear me say crash. When I say all-time highs, you're not listening to a word I am saying. This is what I've been talking about. I think once we reach this level, I do think that a top will develop. It is my personal belief that that will be the case, and then I think these divergences will play out, and I think it's going to be ugly, and I think you're going to get a 20% crash real fast, a reversal, and then you'll get a bear market and a bear market crash. Usually it starts off with about a 20% drop. But let me repeat, those with selective hearing, again, I believe we're going to reach new all-time highs. I don't believe we've reached the peak yet. So again, want to continue to make that perfectly clear. And if you get that, then great. Sometimes, again, people cherry pick and they only pick out and hear what they want to hear, and the rest of it they leave. And it's really fortunate because, again, I remain bullish. I just happen to believe that we're in a topping process that will usher in a bear market. So you got this divergence going on here. You got the divergence going on with the MACD. It's all over the place. Divergence in the more recent price action with the stochastic, and we've got it. A lot of indicators, money flow, the oscillator. It's just all over the place. And I talked about NASDAQ moving up to this trend line right here. If we clear this trend line, which again, that allows the NASDAQ to move towards a monthly trend line. It had not reached it down here at this trend line. So again, this is where we're likely headed with NASDAQ forming the divergence on the RSI and here on the MACD. So again, a trend line I'm watching here. And I'm watching the Dow. The Dow is now taking out the 20 period ever so slightly. I'm watching to see if it does rally back up. S&P makes a new all-time high. Does the Dow make a lower high? Or does it form a divergence? Watching this closely, the RSI and the MACD in the daily time frame. Dow's turning off a trend line here from the 2021 high, rising wedge pattern if we go further back to the pandemic low. Nice looking negative divergence on the RSI and the MACD down there. If we zoom in, we have this channel going back here from the 2022 sell-off and the lows there in 2022, and again turning right off that trend line right on the nose here with the Dow. So we'll see if we do rally back up. Does the Dow stop making new highs? It's turned off of this trend line already. I pointed out that the Dow hit its trend line. It's turning off of it. NASDAQ moving toward, moving above the longer term channel, but moving towards that other trend line I've talked about. Got this nice looking divergence on the Russell, and again, the weekly chart of the Russell, it's turned down off of those highs. I'll be watching to see if the Russell and the Dow have peaked. Russell daily chart, and again, here's that larger channel. And again, if the Russell rises, does it also make a lower high? Or does it form a divergence? You got NASDAQ moving to a new high, the S&P about to, and the Russell still down here, so is the Dow. So we'll be watching these divergences on the Dow and the Russell have produced these sell-offs. The Russell surrounding the 20 period, the Dow just below it. So again, I'll be watching. Does the Russell and the Dow, do they stop making new highs, or do they Go to those upper boundaries one more time. I think S&P will reach that surrounding the Fed meeting, or here in December anyways. We do have this long-term Dow theory signal where we've had a lower high on the transports, a higher high on the Dow. Just something we're paying attention to as the Dow's hitting that upper channel line in the weekly time frame with that negative diversion. So we'll be watching the Dow. I told you to be watching NASDAQ. It's overthrowing it. It previously overthrew that upper boundary, and it's doing it again. Remember, NASDAQ's already moved above the July peak trend line right here. S&P stalled at it. That acted as support. Do you see that? We came above it, and then we came back to it. We bounced. And then a big day up. We're up 386 points, up 1.85%. And again, we're getting an overthrow here, probably moving towards that trend line in the weekly time frame that I've been talking about. Again, MACD has failed to roll over here. Still have a divergence here, but again, it may not be done yet. Or again, that MACD just may move to new highs, and you know, the divergence may get canceled out. I think we're moving towards the top, and again, we'll see if you got NASDAQ moving to new all-time highs, bouncing off gap support and that trend line right there from the July level, and the horizontal gap support in our 10 period just below it. We'll see if the S&P will join NASDAQ in making a new all-time high. I believe it will. You got momentum moving higher here. So again, we could see the weekly trend line reached. Again, I talked about the bottoming tail yesterday on the 60-minute chart. Told you we still may go lower and try to fill the gap. But I told you, again, I thought we'd rebound on the S&P, and then I told you to be watching. Does NASDAQ diverge with the S&P or not? Their scenario was they both start moving to new highs. Well, NASDAQ has now moved to new high, big move up. NVIDIA is still not moving to new highs. It's still forming that right shoulder. Had an update, but I don't think NVIDIA is going to make new highs, and I think that that is a huge warning sign for the market. But we could form a multiple point divergence here as we're doing right now, and to complete that soon, or again, a brand new divergence over here. Building upon this, or again, to new extremes. We'll see how it unfolds. I'll be watching this trend line here on the NASDAQ with these divergences in the weekly time frame. And I think NVIDIA is still carving out this right shoulder. It's moving back, probably going to close above to fill the gap on a closing basis here. Did it on an intraday basis yesterday, but we dropped below the trend line. We're holding at horizontal support, and then we're trying to get back above the 50 now again. I think NVIDIA peaked over here. I talked about that before it happened with the earnings. And I talked about these divergences and the long-term resistance levels. Head and shoulders completes, as I think it will over time here, but I think it's not done yet, and I think that it could be. I think we're going back up here again to these areas, and then I think we'll see that roll over. I think the time is short. Got a good chance of it finishing here in December. If it does, I think these divergences will play out with NVIDIA. We'll take out the trend line here. I think that you could see that in December or January, as I've said. I think that would terminate the bull market. I think NVIDIA is sending huge warning signs, but people are ignoring it. I've never seen so much complacency in my life. I think we have more complacency now than we did at the peak with the tech bubble, and people were complacent back then, but I think we've got complacency 2.0. And again, you've got this triple divergence, the strongest reversal signal in technical analysis. You got the divergence here on the MACD. It's all over the place, rolling over there. So again, I think that we're in a topping process with the head and shoulders on the daily chart. I think we'll eventually come down here, and then people will go, oh, what happened? Telling us this time's different. AI, this time's different. Now, if I'm wrong, again, we could still go to this trend line and go to a new high. That's certainly possible. If you go to this level right here and you go to a new high, you're going to just slam against the long-term trend line again. That's all you're going to do. But it's a breaking of this trend line that I think will terminate the bull market with NVIDIA, terminate the AI rally, and terminate the bull market altogether. Are you picking up what I'm throwing down? Live it, love it, learn it. I'm constantly showing you this chart because the break of that channel, which is this channel right here, will confirm a reversal off of this trend line. That's where we turned down in June. That was when the CEO was doing all the selling. I think that's the most important trend line in the stock market. If it breaks, I think it will validate a reversal for NVIDIA, terminating the bull market for NVIDIA, terminating the bull market for the stock market and AI stocks. Trend line from 1929 to the 2000 top, again pointing to where we're at right now, overthrowing it again. Reach this target on Black Friday. I think we're going a little bit higher into that 6100, as I've been warning before we ever hit the target level. overthrowing it right now. I think we even go a little bit higher. We'll be watching to see what the monthly candlestick looks like by the end of the week, by the end of the month. It may be a topping tail. We go higher and then we see some kind of topping tail or reversal bar. It may even close back below the trend line before the month ends if we rally higher and hit these levels. But I've been talking about reaching this level. And again, the further right you go to the chart, on the chart, the higher the trend line goes. We've already reached it on the very last day of November. I told you I thought we'd overthrow it to hit the trend line in the weekly time frame. That is at the high 6100 area right now. If we take our time going into the end of December or on into January, then it goes up into the 6200 area. The trend lines are the target, not a number. I think we're completing a blow off top. I think it's nearly done. I don't think it's done. I've made that perfectly clear. Again, I talked about the NASDAQ not reaching its monthly trend line. Now, if we exclude the shadow up here at the bursting of the tech bubble, which is a topping tail, we reached it already and hit with that 2021 peak. But I talked about if we include it, then it's still higher. And again, we're now up at that level. So again, possibly overthrow it here and reach that trend line in the weekly time frame, just like I've been talking about on the S&P 500. But again, I think you're probably going to see a top in December or January, and I think you got a pretty good shot it happens in December. NASDAQ coming up to the monthly trend line right now, and again, we're just right there at it. And we could overthrow it. We could see a topping tail before the month ends. We'll see how it unfolds. Some important trend lines I've been watching in the weekly and the monthly time frame. This is the NASDAQ the NASDAQ monthly chart.